News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Possible setback for some of President Trump's tariffs because a federal appeals court has now ruled that the president exceeded his authority by imposing global tariffs through an emergency law. But at the same time, the court is letting the levy stay in place while that case proceeds. Democratic strategist, Iona University political science professor Jeannie Shanzena calls the developments unsurprising.
Reading the statute, it was very, very hard to imagine that the court would support a declaration of an emergency. He talked about an emergency for things like the trade deficit, for instance, but yet that has been going on for decades and decades, hardly constituting an emergency.
And she commented there on Bloomberg's balance of power. The administration could potentially turn to the Supreme Court for a final ruling or let the Court of International Trade revisit the matter first. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warning of U.S. embarrassment if the tariffs are ultimately ruled illegal. In Ukraine, the former Speaker of Ukraine's parliament and a leader of the protests in 2013 and 2014 has been shot and killed. President Vladimir Zelensky, in a post on X, calling the killing of the 54-year-old Andrei Parubiy horrendous murder. The U.S. and Taiwan could feasibly manufacture weapons jointly. That is according to Senate Armed Services Committee Chair Roger Wicker. Wicker and Senator Deborah Fisher met with Taiwan's Defense Minister Wellington Koo, and their visit drew criticism from Beijing, which sees the island as part of its territory. The U.S. is expected to station an official from its Defense Innovation Unit in Taiwan by the end of this year. In the Middle East, a source tells the Associated Press Israel will soon halt or slow humanitarian aid into parts of northern Gaza. That's as it expands its offensive, attempting to cripple Hamas in the area. And in Indonesia, police and military are vowing a strong response to national protests over corruption and inequality. That's after demonstrations turned violent and left 3 people dead Friday. Meantime, the FDA has approved of the updated COVID-19 vaccines to target the latest strains of that virus, but the CDC has yet to sign off, and the approval is so far only for adults over 65 or those 64 and younger with underlying health conditions. Mystery, meantime, surrounds $1 billion Army contract to build a huge detention camp in the Texas desert. Bloomberg's Amy Morris has more on that.
The Trump administration last month awarded a $1.2 billion contract to build and operate what is expected to be the nation's largest immigration detention complex. Acquisition Logistics, based in Virginia, has never won a federal contract for more than $16 million, and it doesn't have experience running correction facilities. The Pentagon refuses to disclose the Army's contract with Acquisition Logistics or explain why it selected that company to build the massive tent camp in Texas. Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you, Amy. Investors also keeping an eye on tariff developments over the weekend. Retailers also in focus for any sign of tariffs and what it means for consumers and inflation. Dana Telsey, CEO of Telsey Advisory Group.
What we've seen as we've gone through earnings season is you haven't heard that it's been the full impact. And keep in mind, we've had a price tracker on 80 items since April. And what we've seen on iconic items, whether Levi's 501, Barbie dolls, we haven't seen big increases across the board.
Telsey is CEO of Telsey Advisory Group. Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco President Mary Daly suggested policymakers will be ready to lower interest rates soon. She says tariff-related price increases will be a one-off. Meantime, former Kansas City Fed President Esther George tells us the Fed is just trying to keep an eye on the ball with all the political pressure swirling.
This is a time as the economy is showing shifts, whether it's from policy, whether it's from cyclical factors, that you really want the committee to be able to focus on the debates they will be having at their meeting in September. And I suspect they are doing their best to spend their time focused on those key issues so that when they come to the table in a few weeks, they can really make those decisions in a manner that serves the public, serves the economy longer term.
Former Kansas City Fed President Esther George. And the Fed's FOMC meeting meets again mid-September. And that's News When You Want It with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini. This is Bloomberg.